Call this June meeting of the Hudson River Black River Regulating District Board to order. Start with the pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And it is Flag Day, I see. We've all been decorated. Roll call?
Mr. Chairman, David Bergstresser.
Here.
Michael Astaphan.
Excused.
Albert Hayes.
Here.
Philip Klein. Here. Thomas Stover.
Here.
Mark Finkel.
Here.
Michael Clark.
Here.
Robert Leslie.
Here.
Robert Boltan.
Here.
Carol Wright.
Here.
Richard Ferrari. Here. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I need a motion to adopt or revise the meeting agenda. Is there any changes?
Move to adopt.
Okay. We have a motion?
Second.
A second? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. I don't believe there were any guests. Yeah. All right. Yep. All right. Today we'd like to. I think we're going to need an executive session to discuss the personnel and some litigation matters.
So
All right.
moved.
I'd like to, and I'd also like to include the acting executive director, general counsel, chief financial officer.
So moved.
All right. So I have a motion
Second.
and a second. Motion is Mr. Klein, Mr. Stover. Motion and second. I have a motion and second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Oh, and do not. I don't think we're planning on conducting any business when we get out. So should be all set there. So we have a motion. So moved. All right. We're moving too fast here for me. Let's slow down. Okay. Public comment period. Mr. Campanile.
Good morning, Board.
Good morning.
Thank you. After the 11/12/2011 and May 10th, 2011 Hudson River Black River Regulating District Board meetings, we presented our request for the Board to find an administrative solution to the repeated rule and law violations that have been occurring since 2007 and still are occurring by other permittees on our permit area. These violations have been reported to the Hudson River Black River Regulating District's administration when they occurred, and we have provided the current Hudson River Black River Regulating District Board Chair with pictures, and pictures do not lie, and a narrative with each picture describing the rule or law violation by the named individual permit holders, which that documentation fully refutes Mr. Gorka's 5/10/11 directive attempt to fool the Hudson River Black River Regulating Board that he and other named permit holders would not jeopardize, quote, jeopardize losing their permits, quote, by such juvenile and unproductive actions. Knowing the history of these permit holders' illegal and menacing behavior, once the spotlight is off them, they will ratchet up their illegal and menacing behavior as they have done since 2007. Therefore, we are again requesting the Hudson River Black River Regulating Board to find an administrative solution as provided for under Title VI, Section 606.95 of the Hudson River Black River Regulating District's Rules and Regulations. At the bare minimum, it would be appreciated if the Hudson River Black River Regulating District would send each of these named individuals a letter stating that these rules and law violations will no longer be tolerated, and if they continue, their permit will be in jeopardy based on the board's decision. We thank you for your time and appreciated help in this matter. Are there any questions, or does anybody other than Mr. Bergstresser saw our pictures and narratives?
I did, I got them, I looked at them, I called Mr. Clark and discussed it with him. I know Mike, you met with everybody, I think, or tried to.
I did.
Again, we've been busy with other, I apologize for the other issues.
I understand.
So we will continue to look at it, I'll talk to Mike and we'll see if we can't find you a solution, everybody, a solution, that, you know, neighborly, how's that?
Good,
A
that's
neighborly
fine.
solution.
Right.
And I think that's where it boils down to.
And as Mr. Clark said in one of his letters, it's a respectful thing. We do not go on other people's permit areas, and we would like them to respect our permit area. But how that's achieved is up to the board, and we have been here now 3 times. And if you could kindly give us a timeline or... Okay. So we will have to sustain the ongoing problems?
Well, I would like to think more along the lines of everybody would attempt to work something out, but we'll continue to look into it.
Would you feel that if we continue to come to these meetings, it's a waste of your time and ours, or is it being productive to bring forth these problems?
That's up to you.
Well, you know, again, I don't want to waste the board's time if there's an agenda that you're going to be following that may be helpful or may not be helpful. I don't know at this point.
I couldn't tell you either right now. Have to discuss it with legal counsel and I'll discuss it with Mike again.
Mr. Chairman, it's my understanding that the board sent a letter to Mr. Campanile responding to his 2 prior appearances.
Okay. Did you receive that letter?
No letter was sent to me.
It was sent. It was posted in the mail. It probably was not an answer that Mr. Campanile was looking for.
Right. Yes, it was.
In the past, there's been, not necessarily with Mr. Campanile, but with, in my years of public service, it's been my experience when the letter is not of the liking of the recipient, it's less likely they acknowledge receipt of such letter.
That's a policy, sir. Mr. Clark can
I'm not
attest to-
speaking with regard to you personally, I'm speaking with regard to
general.
my experience in general.
Well, since
We will
since
make
this is
sure that
my
this
issue,
letter
sir,
does get to Mr. Campanile. Send another copy.
All right, well, we'll discuss it and again, I'll have him reissue the letter to you. How's that?
Well,
Our reply.
that's unusual that the letter didn't receive.
Okay.
Mr. Clark can attest that he has sent me many letters that I have confirmed either by email or by writing
Okay.
that I've received all of his letters,
Okay.
as well as other correspondence. So this mysterious letter has not been received. I don't run from letters. I don't run from the board. I
We're not saying-
rely on.
nobody's saying
I know. I'm just saying that I.
We'll send it
understand
again. We'll send it again and
I'll make sure that I receive a copy of the letter, and I will see to it that it goes to Mr. Campanile via email.
Okay. We'll start
I should be able to take
We'll
care of
go
that
from there.
tomorrow.
Okay.
All right,
Thank
good.
you very much.
Thanks. All righty. Mr. Smale? Is it Smale or Smale?
Thank you.
My name is David Smale, and I am Vice President of the Great Sacandaga Lake Association and Chairman of the GSLA Lake Water Level Study Group. The Level Study Group currently has 4 members, with 3 of them being engineers. One of the members is retired from an eastern Pennsylvania utility where he served in many engineering and operational positions involved in power stations for 38 years. For 10 of those years, he was the plant betterment engineer responsible, among other things, the operations or support of a large hydro project on the lower Susquehanna River. I want to thank the board for its actions that directed the regulatory district to investigate opening discussions with the signatories of the Upper Hudson Sacandaga Settlement Agreement to improve the control of the level of the Great Sacandaga Lake. We, however, believe that this action is unnecessary. The GSLA believes that the settlement agreement provides sufficient flexibility to allow the regulatory district to accomplish many of its objectives without undergoing a major discussion with all the signatories. I will explain our position. The settlement agreement established the aggressive use of water storage, which uses the storage capacity of the Great Sacandaga Lake to enhance the hydroelectrical generation and extend the boating season during the fall. During the development of the offer of settlement, computer simulations used 74 years of U.S. Geological Survey lake level and Hudson River flow data to analyze various operating schemes. We were told that the aggressive use of storage would only increase the number of days that the lake would be above 770 by about 1 day per year. During the past 9 years, we have experienced a significant amount of time where the lake level is above 770 feet, and 6 years where the level exceeded the top of the spillway. These high levels have resulted in erosion of the lake shoreline, damage to docks and stairways, flooding of the Northampton Beach campsite, pollution of the lake, destruction of public beaches, damage to equipment, and delay in construction of the new Bachelorville Bridge. The reduced water storage capacity below the spillway level has impeded the ability of the regulatory district to prevent flooding downstream and place greater stress on the aging Conklinville Dam and its auxiliary equipment. For more than 8 years, I and my team have monitored the lake level and flows of the river system, and I will tell you that Rob Fulton and his team has done a very good job in making releases from the lake in accordance with his understanding of the offer of settlement. It is not clear why the observed lake levels have deviated from the computer estimates. However, it is clear that when long-term weather conditions exceed historical averages by more than 1 standard deviation, the lake release have not maintained the level near the target elevation. The GSLA agrees that the regulatory district needs to improve the level control. However, we believe the offer of settlement does not need to be changed at this time. The goal of the aggressive use of storage can be achieved without jeopardizing the regulatory district's mission of flood protection and flow augmentation. The goal of increasing hydroelectric generation and extending boating season during the fall can be achieved by maintaining the lake level at the target elevation and minimize the amount of water that is released through the dial valves and over the top of the spillway. When lake levels are significant distance from the target elevation or in danger of exceeding the spillway elevation, the regulatory district should take action to restore the storage capacity in the lake to ensure the regulatory district's other missions are not put at risk. It should be noted that at such times as the summer of 2006, when lake level is near 768, the lake does not have sufficient storage capacity, and the regulatory district has few remedies to prevent the lake level from exceeding the top of the spillway due to high flows in the river system during large storms. We believe the agreement provides sufficient flexibility to permit preemptive actions in those situations. I'm happy to report that we have met with Mike Clark on May 18th, and through several follow-up phone calls and emails, we have achieved a common understanding of the offer of settlement provides sufficient authority for the regulatory district to address the water management issues that we have experienced. Through subsequent discussions with Tom Unscher, or Brookfield Renewable Power's General Manager for New York East Regional Operations, I have determined that he agrees with our understanding of the offer of settlement. I am looking forward for an upcoming meeting with the regulatory district, Brookfield Power, and my team so we can discuss specific recommendations on how the regulating district will be regulating the water system in the future. In conclusion, the GSLA is glad that we were able to share our expertise with the district. We look forward to ongoing discussions on this and other issues which impact the lake community. We hope this example of cooperation will serve a background as the district board discusses establishment of our often requested lake-wide advisory board. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Any questions?
No, I think we kind of agree with you on a lot. All right, anybody else that didn't sign up that'd like to speak? All righty. Thank you. Need approval of the board minutes from May 10th, 2011. Any changes? Okay, any questions? No. Motion and second, Stover, Mr. Stover. Mr. Pinkle. That was easy.
Vote.
All those in favor? Thank you. Aye. Any opposed? Report from the acting executive director. Mike?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You'll find my report beginning on page 9 in your board package. You'll notice within the board package itself, and particularly in Mr. Fulton's, the chief engineer's section, that many of the, all of the graphs now are currently in black and white. We can supply them in color and bring them to the meeting. Color is easier to read. However, it really lengthens the time it takes for us to prepare the document. So if anybody would like to see these, all of the chief engineer's report, or the components that would normally be in color, we can provide those.
I have no problem.
Having said that, in the 21st century, we now have at least the ability, or sometimes the luxury of being able to transmit these documents electronically. And I would like to at least suggest to the board and get some feedback as to whether anybody, or the board as a whole, would consider, when the board package is prepared now, we got to copy them, we got to print them, we got to assemble them, of course, and then we got to mail them and get them to all members in advance so that they have it at least a week in advance. We could, and I think, I would guess that the members would still want to have a hard copy before they get to the meeting, because, quite frankly, I don't like to read off a computer screen necessarily. But we can meet that requirement of having that package out in advance, and by posting it on our website in a PDF form. We post the agenda now. We could just as easily, in that same section page on our website, post a PDF of the draft board package at the same time. It's at that point it is a public document, and
Most aspects of it are a public document.
Sure.
if there was anything that needed to be redacted, you would do that. And anything
And
that
that
was
would be-
confidential would be just supplied in
Just
the,
supplies a hard copy at the meeting?
yeah.
I have no problem.
I'd like to give it a shot.
Sure. Like to try it.
Okay, so then for our next meeting, we'll give that a try for the
Sure.
July meeting, and
Yeah.
appreciate any feedback from anybody.
Let's try it and see how it goes.
It'd be nice, is there a way to do it and get rid of some of the paper? And not have a full packet at the meeting?
I've been saying that for 25 years.
Yeah,
I'd
I
love
was
to get rid of as
thinking
much paper as possible.
Yeah, I was thinking that if we did receive it electronically, that those of us who wanted to print it off could print it off. We'd let you know that we
I'll
were
let you know
going
that
to
we
print it
did
off,
that.
and you wouldn't have to send us a
Then,
packet.
then there's no duplication.
Okay, and we could also have the reports in color if you wanted to print them off in color. the report.
And they would be in color
Right.
anyway.
So that would be fine with me. I'd
That's
just
fine with
as soon
me, yeah.
try that.
Yeah, and we'll just notify if you're gonna print your own off.
You know, buy ream paper. I don't know.
Well, you're going to have hard copies at the meeting.
Yes.
Or
But you're not gonna
we can
send
get
it.
them
They
to
can
you in
mail it.
advance if you'd prefer.
Well, that's pretty expensive, isn't it? It's
It's,
Yeah.
it's
something.
an expense. We can bring copies with us
That'd be fine.
so that you have them in front of you.
That's all.
If they're
And
on the
if you get a notice, then that's one less copy you'd have to
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll notify you that I
We'll let you
printed
know
it
one
off.
way or the other whether we need a hard copy or whether we'll supply it all.
Yeah, that's fine.
So
All right, then.
we want to give that a shot for next
Let's
month?
try it
Yeah.
for a month or two.
Super, I think we will then.
Okay.
And that was my primary question to the board. The month of May saw continued a lot of activity involving, the chief engineer and myself, and discussions regarding the offer of settlement, and what was a popular topic last month. And the majority of our efforts centered around that. I would also like to mention that the staff at the Sacandaga Field Office, but I'm jumping reports here, I'm sorry, I'll save that for my other one.
Mike, do you want to touch on if there was any results or movement towards results with regards to Senator Ritchie with the Stillwater?
Sure.
And Beaver River flooding, and same with Senator Little and the Sacandaga?
With,
Let's do the Beaver River first.
Senator Ritchie first.
we met multiple times over the last month with Senator Ritchie, state senator from the Watertown area, and her concern was that her constituents experienced significant flood flows in the Black River, and that they felt they could have more, she felt that they could have more warning about. It was our opinion that the warning was certainly out there and would routinely and normally be provided through NOAA Weather Radio and the NOAA National Weather Service flood warnings. We did meet, as of our last meeting, we met with Senator Ritchie and her staff, as well as folks from SEMO, and also New York Alert, which is really, I think, a component of Homeland Security. And the short of it is that what we came to as a solution would be that the chief engineer would, when notices are posted to the website regarding releases from Stillwater Reservoir, or in particularly related to, jump in if you recall something different, Rob, but related to high flows or unusual releases from the Stillwater Reservoir or Fulton Chain of Lakes, that information would also be forwarded to the folks at New York Alert. And I think you had a discussion in terms of what format they wanted it in.
Yeah, we're working, we have I've just started work with New York Alert to determine the way we can transfer the information, since we do release it currently through email to a limited group of interested parties, and in particular hydros. It's just a matter of determining the most effective way to get that information on a daily basis, and then have New York Alert establish the method for relaying that information, and then from that point, it's just going to be making the public aware that they can subscribe to whatever communication technology they might prefer to receive and desire to receive that particular information. And
It's not going to, the onus isn't going to be put on us, though, to notify the general public. And we don't have the capability to do that. So if we notify certain individual organizations, the Sheriff's Department, New York Alert, things like that?
well, actually, I think in the end, what we'll have is a system where, through New York Alert, individuals who want to receive direct notification of our releases can do so.
By contacting them?
By contacting New York Alert.
Okay.
And we will provide the information in some fashion, some form, on a daily basis, all of our releases, so that anyone who wishes to subscribe to that communication method to receive the information from New York Alert can do so.
So we're not going to duplicate any services? We're just going to enhance
No, hopefully not. We want to avoid that with regard to the services already provided by New York Alert in conjunction with the National Weather Service, and that they already provide, I think there was a quote of 14,000 alerts annually or something like that that come through the National Weather Service to New York Alert. And anything that we would do in a similar fashion to that would be nothing more than relaying the National Weather Service forecasts and warnings. So I think we're squared away with regard to those types of warnings, but our information itself will be something new to the New York Alert system.
I have a question for council. We have not, nor do we intend to accept any additional liability with regards to alerting people below the dam with regards to an alert. We're just going to, we've accepted that we're going to talk to New York Alert and a few select other people that sign up through New York Alert.
Right.
Okay, so that's our only,
That's our only obligation.
okay.
We're passing along information we already compile to an alert system that will disseminate and take whatever responsibility for.
But once we tell them, then our hands are off of it, right?
Right.
How do we do it second dog then?
Well, with respect to Senator Little's district, Saginaw Lake, there were multiple meetings. We all met with attorneys in main office, DEC, chief engineer, myself, and our general counsel to discuss offer of settlement. And subsequently, and in part due to a follow-on event, we met with Region 5 Director Betsy Lowe and regional attorney and their regional water engineer.
And the regional permit administrator.
And the regional permit administrator to discuss the particulars in how they would be notified if and when the regulating district takes exception to the offer of settlement, and how the notifications would work. And that actually did happen on one occasion. I think it was 2 weeks ago now, where we did just that. And so we just, she was really looking for feedback and with regard to that.
So when you say that, do you mean that we varied from the offer of settlement 2 weeks ago? Or?
Yes, we did.
Yes.
Okay. And we felt that we varied enough that it was outside the offer, not wasn't within that flexibility area?
Well, we feel that that flexibility allows you to go outside the offer under certain circumstances.
Okay.
And
I'm just wondering if we have arrived mentally on a new parameter of the flexibility of the offer settlement.
That's a good way to
allowed
put it.
ourselves to look at it as having a little more leg room on either side.
That's probably a fair assessment, and I don't want to speak necessarily for the chief engineer, but I think that so stop me if I'm misstating this.
I'd be glad to jump in anytime, but I'll let you keep going.
But
Supplement.
essentially, if the chief engineer observes or forecasts the reservoir to exceed 771 with the possibility of it going higher than that, it's currently our opinion that there is enough latitude there to increase releases beyond. The chief engineer can increase releases from Great Sacandaga beyond
Normal.
beyond the parameters that the offer would allow, and the caveat to that being, at the same time, not exceed or push flows within the Hudson to levels that approach flood stage.
Could I add my 2 cents in there too? We had discussed with internally the concept that we had amassed enough data to understand that the method of operation under the offer of settlement provided us very little leeway or very little opportunity to continue to fulfill our core mission. And armed with that data, began to discuss what in the offer of settlement precludes us from releasing water early in an event when it is most advantageous to do so. And really arrived at the point where the engineering staff had a view of a concept, observation, that was fully in compliance with engineering standards, and yet we realized that the document wasn't written by engineers, it was written by lawyers. And Rob and I had a great discussion back and forth where we really disagreed about what observation means. And Mike came in, and as he is wont to do as a professional engineer, looked at it exactly the same way that Rob looked at it. And we began to realize that maybe the document didn't need to be interpreted as restrictively as we had been doing. So we reached out to DEC, we talked to their legal staff, basically, who had already spoken with their engineering staff, their dam safety staff, and based on one of those attorneys at DEC's recollection of his involvement in the negotiation of the agreement, he said, yeah, you guys have been doing a fantastic job of staying right on where you ought to be, but there's greater flexibility there available to you than you've been making or taking advantage of. So that's really where we arrived. We then took that same argument to the regional office at DEC, and my understand also Brookfield had a role in watching the levels and watching the releases. And I think Rob would agree he has greater flexibility now as a result of those conversations than he thought he had had previously.
I only have one more question. Do you have anything in writing?
got it on the record in the board meeting. But no.
Okay, nothing in writing from DEC then? Or a
Right.
memo or anything like that?
No.
Okay. Would it be possible, do you think, to document the thought
Well,
some way, even if it's a letter from us summarizing the understanding?
we did give some thought to that, and one of the things that we were thinking about, and one of the reasons that I spoke up in this meeting was literally to get it on the record in the board meeting that
Okay.
this was a discussion that was had, contemporaneous with the discussion. We now have a record of that discussion.
Okay.
The next thing that we have is shortly after this first discussion and pretty much contemporaneous with the second discussion, we had the first instance where under section 3.6.1 of the offer of settlement, the chief engineer made the decision to deviate from the offer of settlement
Yep.
and did so. Deviated, determined when we were going to start deviating, determined when we were going to stop deviating, and DEC was fully aware of that. We made everybody aware, per a notice that Rob sent out, of exactly what we were going to do, and received basically a positive response. And that evidence of a positive response, especially from those who would be most likely to object, namely the hydro tower.
And the positive response was
DEC was pleased with our effort,
verbally.
verbally.
If we can document anything, I mean,
Right.
you know, you're the attorney.
Well, the absence
The more we
of
can
the absence of a letter from them,
I understand.
contemporaneous, is our current documentation.
I understand.
I
But if
would
we can generate any kind of written-
agree that if we can get them to send us a letter
Or
indicating.
send them a letter. Just make sure they got it, and, yeah,
Well-
at least that strengthens our case. That's
Right.
all.
Rob did send them a notice indicating that we were deviating, and that if they had any objection, now is the time for them to speak up,
Which they did
Yeah,
not.
nothing.
which they did not.
Okay.
I think that's good enough.
Yeah.
And maybe we could actually confirm that.
Give them enough time.
Okay.
Give
Well,
them
it's-
enough time?
Well, yeah, I was just that maybe we didn't give them enough time, although I don't think in this particular situation they
Well,
will.
they could have picked the phone up.
Yeah, they put it in writing. When we put the reservoir down below the target minimum elevation back in 2002 or 2003, they were fairly quick to remind us that that was a hard bottom elevation.
How quick, Rob?
Within a couple months. They wrote a letter, and then we had a meeting, and clearly expressed their opinion in interpreting the offer settlement low target elevations to mean low and nothing below that unless the Hudson River required the water. So that I couldn't use discretion to draw below the target low elevation if I found there was a need because of impending storms or snowpack. And except for the provisions that are within the offer of settlement. So certainly in this situation, on the other end of the spectrum, you know, on a high side, I think that within a couple of weeks, if we don't see a letter, we probably won't see the letter.
Well,
But
as long as it's on record, that's one good step, but if
And
we
it-
could.
And it certainly
We did.
isn't, yeah, it's certainly not an answer to every event that results in high inflow or the reservoir rising. Because there are, while Mr. Clark, Mr. Leslie alluded to the fact that I deviated, the deviation is as defined by the offer of settlement. There are limitations to the ability to deviate and defines the situation in which you can deviate. And so, you know, short of those circumstances, the offer of settlement doesn't provide an opportunity to deviate from the maximum flow thresholds. that are established in the tables in the offer settlement.
And I think we all understand that. The only thing I'm stating is that if we were not chastised and looked on favorably for going in the direction and to the degree that we did, then I'd like to memorialize that in a memo of some kind, so that we've got some basis to say, look, we did it in 2011, and everything worked out fine, and nobody said anything.
Well, part of the requirements of offer settlement include a follow-up summary report, which I'm working on now.
Okay.
Which I'm going to kind of make a standardized report in the event that we have this situation in the future, but we'll certainly repeat what was the rationale and circumstance of the deviation, and then the net effect, or the hypothetical situation compared to the actual situation that resulted from the deviation, so that the event is well documented. That gets submitted to the DEC, and
Okay.
for the most part, I think I'm going to send it to everyone that we are required to contact with regard to this particular provision, the offer of settlement, so that everyone understands the situation. But,
Understands that we deviated to fulfill our mission.
yep, and explains why. Sure, sure.
To fulfill our own mission.
The only thing I would add to this discussion is that we're all, myself and our general counsel and the rest of the board, we're able to talk about this in such detail. But I have to give credit where credit's due, and it's only because our chief engineer has a extremely thorough understanding and the ability to, through that understanding, to identify, and not just identify, but forecast to a certain extent the situations where a deviation from that offer of settlement will better allow us to meet our mission under those extreme circumstances and without any undue negative consequences. So his experience is what gives the regulating district the ability to identify when we would be able to do that and when you can't, and to make it work. Okay. So I just think that should be noted, recognized.
Good. Knowledgeable and well-documented deviation. Okay. Anything else?
I'll take any other questions, of course, that the board has.
Anybody have any more questions for Mike? Okay, thanks. Thanks, Mike. Now we get into the committee sessions. I don't see any business under permit system. All right, governance. Mr. Esteban, Mr. Hayes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's no old business. The only new business we have is just a council report from Mr. Leslie.
Thank you, Mr. Hayes. My report begins on page 11 of the board packet. I guess to play upon a couple of things that Mike alluded to earlier, both way earlier and just a minute ago. This past month has been the first month we've been without Ann Fisher, the legal assistant. I am finding how much I value her participation in the things we did. Just yesterday, putting together a letter took me, way longer than I ever imagined it possibly could. But eventually got it done. So, in that respect, it's been busy. To build on something else that Mike said, or was talking about, it's been a fascinating month because it's been a month of a lot of discussion about our core mission, how we fulfill it, and what our roles are as we go forward. Getting a chance to go out and listen to the DEC commissioner, expound on where the state is headed. At the same time, we're talking with the regional people and the central office attorneys over there about what they see as our mission and how we're going to fulfill it, and then kind of bringing that back around and talking with the council representing us from the Attorney General's office, as well as council representing the 5 counties, and kind of rehashing some of where we've been over the last couple of years. It was an interesting month. There's not a lot to show for it on paper, but there were a whole lot of discussions. The 5 counties case we're going to talk about, that's you asked to go to executive session to have that discussion. We have also received a notice of claim from a Mrs. Kennedy and a Mr. Rogerio regarding the Saratoga County highway failure up near Conklinville. My understanding is that the town, the county, and us have each received a notice of claim. I have not heard yet whether the state has received a notice of claim, but I wouldn't be surprised if they did.
And they mentioned us because we were in the proximity of the event?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I think their car may have, fallen into our reservoir. That's about the extent of our responsibilities.
Well, it didn't really fall into our reservoir.
Yeah, well,
It fell into...
It fell into a hole along a road adjacent to our reservoir,
Yeah.
and maybe the dirt it displaced fell down into our reservoir. It's not. It's not our.
Not crystal clear yet?
It's crystal clear from our perspective. It's not our problem. But
Reminds me of 2 people being on second base. The guy gets the ball, he tags both runners, the umpire, and himself, figuring somebody's going to...
somebody's, we have passed that notice of claim on to our insurance carrier. The carrier had already been out to us to commence their investigation. They represent
Everybody, don't they?
everybody.
Yeah. Exactly.
So we believe we're well in hand in that regard. Other than that, if there's anything else from my report that you want to discuss, I'm ready to answer questions.
No, I've been in touch with Mike on a lot of it. I'm pretty well set. Anybody else have any questions for Rob?
No.
All right. So, unfortunately, Finance Committee, Mr. Stover.
Mr. Chairman, in the absence of Mr. Astaphan, I request that we turn it over to the full committee. The first item is the approval of expenses on page 13. Mr. Astaphan has documented his travels.
Correct. I would move that we approve the expenses submitted by Mr. Astaphan.
I have a motion. Have a second?
A second that.
Okay. Motion and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved.
No old business, and under new business, we have several resolutions to consider. And Mr. Ferreira is involved in all of them, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
That is correct.
Work them one at a time.
The first one is a resolution to approve the annual assessment for the operation and maintenance of storage reservoirs in the Black River area for the third year of the 3-year budget period beginning July 1, 2011 through June 30, 2012. Mr. Ferrer?
My memo is on page 14.
The memo addresses both resolutions concerning the annual assessment for both watersheds. The first assessment is for the Black, as Mr. Stover has stated, and on page 15 is the actual resolution for the assessment for the Black River area. For, as Mr. Stover stated, third year of the budget. That's July 1, 2011 through June 30, 2012. It is for $857,784. And I offer this for the board's review and approval.
All right, any questions?
Just one, pardon me, and I'll ask the same question for the other one if you want to answer both. Pardon me. There's nothing unusual with regards to either of these two assessments for the Black or the Hudson?
Nothing that is inconsistent with each
year's
each year,
project.
certainly in the Black.
Yep.
In the Hudson, the first year had a split assessment, which certain municipalities were included in the first assessment to include some undeveloped properties owned by NIMO. And then the balance, $4 million and change, was assessed onto the 5 counties. Second and third year was a total 5-county assessment.
Good, thank you.
All right, okay. Have a motion?
Also move.
Second, have a motion, have a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Stover, motion second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Oh, do we go?
Was that for both, or just the,
We'll go to
the
the Black
Hudson
River.
River? So the Hudson River, which is on page 16, is, as I stated, the same period, third year, the last year of the 3-year cycle we're currently in. And that assessment is for $5,403,458. And again, it's offered to the board for their review and approval.
Any more questions? All right. Any other questions for Mr. Ferrer on this? All right, so I'll look for a motion. Approve this resolution.
Make that motion.
Have a motion, do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Motion and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved.
When do these bills go out? Usually.
Forthwith, upon return to the office.
Okay.
Well, I have, there's laminated statements to the beneficiaries that I need to sign, so I mean, we get them out quickly, but probably by the end of the week.
Next, item C is a resolution to approve district insurance contract period beginning July 1, 2011 through June 30, 2012. Mr. Ferrera?
This, we had sent under separate cover to the board the actual premium amount, annual amount, which was reported by the agent at Cool to be $158,663, which represents a reduction of almost $9,000 over the previous premium year. Mr. Clark had indicated in his email that probably the lion's share of that reduction has to do with the removal of insurance on the workboat, and then there's other smaller reductions, but that's where the reductions came from. And the resolution is on page 22. Again, the premium year is this July 1, 2011 through June 30, 2012. This does represent, just want to make sure I got my, I'm looking at the history, 2006, I believe this is the last year. Correct, this is the last option year, so next year we would use our local consultant to put together a procurement and do a resolicitation of.
Probably in January or February.
It's been the timing, and I don't see why that wouldn't be the case.
Is there a not to exceed amount other than just a dollar sign at the bottom?
Well, again, the board was sent, that is 158,663.
I'd move that we approve the insurance contract as presented.
I have a motion? Second?
Second.
All right. Motion and second. All those in favor of approval?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. The webcast.
Next, item D, resolution to award webcasting services to Granicus. Again, Mr. Ferrera.
Thank you, Mr. Stover. On page 23 is my memo, 24 is the resolution, and the agreement is on 25 to page 64, excuse me, 43. History is that this is pursuant to Executive Order 3, which requires government entities such as ourselves to webcast our meetings. The order actually requests live webcast. In our case, it was not practical, so we are exempted where we do a delay webcast, and we meet all of the executive order requirements in terms of the delay and also the closed captioning. We have been with more history. This webcasting began with Mike Pollock, who then became webcasting.com and then sold his business to Granicus. We've had basically the same service providers, so the people you have seen on site here doing the job have been the same people over the years for the most part. The service offering has been consistent and excellent throughout. The other focus on this time around was to look at means of reducing the cost. Webcasting is not cheap. It has cost us about $2,500 a month or more, times 10, so you're talking $25,000. Those costs for other agencies are far greater because they're paying for additional production, because they're live. Others are much cheaper. They're doing them on location. We are unique. We do meet in numerous locations, and I think even a best case scenario where we could reduce the number of meeting locations would not greatly reduce the price. So we had to look at other options and other areas that we could reduce. Granicus came up with they have a software product that enables the district on its own to do the webcast. We purchased the software. It's a one-time cost. It's within the documentation. We would also pay an upfront closed captioning fee. And then on a month-to-month going forward, we would reduce our month-to-month cost over 50%. So our $25,000 would be about $15,000. The only variable in there is back to the closed captioning. You're buying a block of hours, so depending on how long these meetings last, and we are fairly static in the length of time. So I think that number that we see, which is around 6,000 change annually, would be basically that number, unless we were to greatly change the way that we meet and the time that we take to meet.
Multi-year contract?
It is for 18 months with the term 18 months, and then it would automatically renew for 3 terms at 1 year each. And again, after the 18-month, the board with notice would still have the option to say this doesn't work for us. I have seen the product on APA uses the product. It looks excellent. So the product, when you look at, again, this is, the cost is really everything sits on their server. The only thing we're going to be doing is pointing that to our esteemed, wonderful webcaster. I do not want to in any way belittle what she does or make light of it. But at the end of the day, the software, once we get through the training, looks fairly straightforward. We will see that when we get through that process. But in the meantime, we will continue to webcast as we are until we receive the training to do this and see exactly how this product works out. So I think it's the way to go. I think it makes sense for us, and I think it gives us some flexibility to do some things, even within the contract, to do some things differently if we like. It's a very feature-rich package, so it can throw the board packet out there on there if we wanted to.
Yeah.
And we have our own website, so but it does give us some flexibility and features to do some things that we don't currently do today. So I would recommend the board approve this contract, give Mr. Clark the authority to execute this, and if the board has any questions.
And it's an 18-month contract?
18 months,
Okay.
correct, with options to go out
Another 3 years. Another 3 years. I think.
3, single years, correct. And again, in any case, there is the in writing 30 days prior to the automatic renewal if we do not wish to continue the agreement. So it's still within the board's power to say this doesn't work. And I don't certainly see that being the case, but it certainly gives us
Yeah.
Save us some money.
short of not doing webcasting, which we do not have the authority.
That's not an option.
There are not many options to.
All right, any questions, any more questions for?
So the resolution is on 24.
So, do I have a motion to accept the resolution as stated on 25? A motion.
Also moved.
Do I have a second?
Sure. I'll second.
You two showed up.
Stover and Pinkel.
Okay, I have a motion and second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So carried.
Next is a motion to authorize the chief financial officer to submit budget request part 203 to Paris. And Mr. Ferrara, would you explain what Paris is for our
I will do
audience?
my best. Paris is the Public Authority Reporting and Information System. It is the state's repository of all state reporting. It has a common place now for everybody in the state to go out and look at any authority, what have you, reports. And also, more importantly, a place for the oversight agencies, the Division of Budget, the Office of the State Controller, where in the past these things were shot individually to them. Now they have one common place to come and look at them and review and make sure that we've completed these reports pursuant to. And in this case, this report is pursuant to it's Public Authority Required Report, and I have attached, because this gets it's a little more involved than just your run-of-the-mill, but it is also pursuant to Part 203, the Budget and Financial Plan Format, supporting documentation and monitoring of public authorities. That is on page 56, and it is very easy reading. The majority of this report speaks to the required elements of the report, and then ends with the covered public authorities, of which we are one.
55.
Correct. The actual report itself begins on page 45 up to page 55. And the elements of the report are pretty straightforward. There's just a written part of the report that speaks to the district's mission, speaks to how we develop our budget, with copies of our budget development schedule, which was approved by the board 3 years ago at the beginning of our current 3-year cycle, and includes current and budget forecast reports, all of which is attached. So the actual reports begin on page 49. 49 is the actual budget development schedule. 50 is one of the is the approved budget. 52 is the forecast, and 53 is the most current quarter for the district's fund summary, which is also on my financial thumbnail for my monthly report to the board, so there's no new information there. And page 54 is actually a copy of the maintenance project budget, which is put together by chief engineer and others. Ends with a written report to the controller, in this case Thomas DiNapoli, where we're required, if there are any financial situations, fiscal situations where we need to deviate greatly from our plan, and in the case of this letter, it has continually focused on the Court of Appeals ruling back in November 2008, which preempted the Hudson River area's funding to a large extent. Whether this letter actually gets to DiNapoli is, I really don't know. I've certainly not gotten a response to any of these letters, but again, we're meeting our fiduciary responsibility in submitting it. So that's the report. It will go to Paris upon the board's approval, and should be the last in the series of the most current required reports until we get to September, where it's the audit report and other things. So it's just a motion in this case, by the way, where we do not have a resolution. It's just a motion authorizing me to submit it.
All right. So I need a motion to authorize Mr. Farrar to submit the budget request.
Yeah, make that motion.
I have a motion, I have a second?
Second. Also. They seconded that.
Phil? Motion second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? So moved.
And finally, in this section, we have the Chief Financial Officer's report. Mr. Farrar.
Thank you, Mr. Stover. My report begins on page 65. There is probably nothing really new in my report from last month. Again, we continue to focus on the funds balance on the Hudson River area side, which is approximately at the close of the most recent fiscal month of May 2011, approximately $490,000. Again, we don't have any foreseeable, really material one-time expenditures or revenue. So again, we are basically spending on a mandate basis, payroll, pension, operations. We are not doing any significant new large projects.
Still hanging by our fingernails.
And, right, but we're hanging in there. And I do indicate in my report that there is a discussion, again, concerning back to the independent audit. So there's an audit committee where I will be presenting to the board a resolution to engage Bonadeo for another year. And beyond that, the reports begin on page 67. Thumbnail and individual watershed reports follow, ended by cash flow charts, which again have pretty much indicated the same flows for cash flow as we sit here today.
All right.
So if the board has any questions?
I have none at this time. Any other questions? All right, thank you. Moving on. Operations Committee? Mr. Hayes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Under old business, there is no old business. Under new business, we have the Chief Engineer's report, Mr. Fulton.
Thank you, Mr. Hayes. My report begins on page 92. As I have, I'll just highlight the Precipitation and releases, again, the Hudson River area, as well as the Black River area, we had another month of significantly excessive precip. In particular, in the Sacandaga, as well as Indian Lake, we had 135% of historic and 275% of historic precip, respectively. Indian Lake was significant. And you see on page 93 of the board package, the table, precipitation had over 8.7 inches of precip at Indian Lake. They were excessive for those three stations that we use to generally represent the watershed. And you'll recall the month of April was fairly similar to this month too. So quite a bit of water. In terms of inflow to Great Sacandaga Lake and Indian Lake, 156 and 225% of historic average. And in response, our release of water from Great Sacandaga Lake and Indian Lake were about 260% of historic average. Quite a bit of water that we had to pass. Black River area was similar. We had precipitation ranging from 195 to 250% of historic average. And our inflow at Stillwater Reservoir was 225% of historic average, with the release at 249% of historic average. We are now, since the writing of the report, clearly taken advantage of some of the drier weather and brought our reservoirs down to expected elevations, and we're not fairly close to them. Even Sacandaga, we benefited from the lack of rain over the last couple of weeks. That combined with the previously discussed exception to the aggressive use of storage and the provision that we can make releases that deviate from or don't conform with the flow thresholds for the Hudson. If we see the reservoir, observe the reservoir rising above 771, that's the key. And I know we've talked about that somewhat at length, but really it boils down to that interpretation of the word observance of the reservoir rising, which moving forward will be the difference in the approach. But again, even that has its limitations in that it requires one to observe the reservoir rising above 771 and potentially over 773. So that provision doesn't apply when we're at 767 and forecasted only rising to 769. And I guess that needs to be understood. Jumping back to the Hudson River area, also I included a couple memorandum. One summarizing the headwater benefit study and the scoping document that was issued by Oak Ridge National Labs and that was issued by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, and a summary of last month's activation of Conklingville Dam's Emergency Action Plan, which I don't need to go into. I discussed it last month, but it just provides a detailed summary to the board documenting the event. I can certainly, I think it's on page, find it. The headwater benefit memo is on page 142. I'm in the process of rereading the scoping document. Started to draft some comments, actually comments which I think will, I hope will offer some additional recognition of some additional benefit that I think At this point, Oak Ridge National Lab has not expressed in their scoping document, and that FERC may not typically recognize in this process, and that has to do with the capacity of the plants themselves downstream of the Great Sacandaga Lake, whereas the typical study and calculation of incremental benefit is based on a comparison of the situation with and without a regulating reservoir. And generally, I believe that's FERC's approach. But in our particular case, the base flow which these hydro plants would be based upon if the reservoir didn't exist would be a significantly lower flow. Thus, the plant size themselves would be significantly smaller, in my estimation. And because of that, there's a base generation which is different than just running the flow that would occur without the reservoir through the existing plant. Case in point, you would clearly not have a 19 megawatt hydro plant at EJ West if it were based just on the Sacandaga flow. And the only reason it is 19 megawatts and not probably, ballpark guess, 10 megawatts is because of Sacandaga. So there's an incremental value there. And there's also an incremental value specifically to EJ West and Stewart's Bridge in that the timing of the releases is solely up to Brookfield. So that those two facilities, about 40 megawatts of power, can be sold specifically when it is of greatest value. And that they can literally choose the hour at which the return will be maximum for them. And that could be fairly significant as compared to the other hydros downstream, which have to take it when it comes, and it could be in the middle of the night, and the rates could be fairly low. So those two elements should add to the benefit that's calculated by FERC. And, I think that covers it. I certainly can address the emergency action plan now that I've summarized it in this memo, if you would like that explained any further, or any of my report.
Fine. No, it's good.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Fulton. Next we got the Hudson River Area Administrator's Report. Mr. Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Hayes. My report begins on page 143. And as the chief engineer just mentioned and as described in his memo on page 140, as the administrator, I responded to the activation of the Conklinville Dam Emergency Action Plan on May 7th, even though that was prior to the last board meeting. I thought I'd mention it again since it's discussed for the record in that memo. That lasted that entire weekend, of course, and we have discussed at length. During the month of May, staff at the Sacandaga Field Office, everyone who wasn't previously trained in the operation of, or some component of the operation of dowel valves at the Conklinville Dam, I can tell you now, are trained. We had numerous times where we had to move staff from, juggle staff around to get them to the dam to operate those valves, in part due to, certainly due primarily to the need to make releases of water from the reservoir, and also due to the fact that the EJ West plant did not have one of their hydro units online for the majority, or actually the entire month. Consequently, with the flows that we had to deal with, staff were frequently headed to and from the dam, and that included weekends. So everyone is now trained in those operations. I should also mention that during the month of May, the chief engineer conducted some additional training for all field staff or even potential field staff that may be involved in operations at the Conclaville Dam, to include visual inspection of the structure, the dam structure, and the measurements taken on a daily basis, that type of thing. And that was a valuable training that the engineer conducted. And it is now the summer season, although you wouldn't know it today. Field staff are on the Sacandaga are again involved in dealing with the permit holders, the work permits, the various surveying activities and so on. And people are beginning to make their way, although it seems somewhat slower this year for whatever reason, making their way back to the lake and into our office on a daily basis. So the activities and the allocation of time necessary is increasing, as you'd expect. And I would be happy to answer any additional questions people have, the board members have regarding my administrator's report.
Oh, I don't have any. Well. Okay, thanks, Mike.
So next we have the Black River Area Administrator's Report. Mrs. Wright.
Thank you, Mr. Hayes. My report starts on page 148, and I'll just highlight a couple things over the last month. Of course, everyone's been talking about the high water inflows, and greatly affects my field staff. They've been busy for the last 6 weeks anyways of cleaning debris from trash racks. There's an enormous amount of debris floating with the high water, so we have a lot of that work to be done. Daily, when the water elevation exceeded 1679.3 up in Stillwater, we were doing daily observations of the dam and doing daily piezometer readings. So they've kept themselves very busy. On top of that, I'm glad to report that our Gate 5 that we've been working on for the last few months has been completed, the replacement of the stem. And our plans are now to move on to Gate 3, which has a similar problem. We think that we'll be able to address that in a much speedier fashion since that we've just completed Gate 5. Aside of our normal maintenance and operations, we are now out in the field still mowing and fertilizing, liming the earthen dikes at Stillwater. The administrative assistants in the Watertown office have taken upon themselves a large job of that we're inventorying all of our maps and engineering drawings that are in the office and kind of compiling them into a much orderly fashion. So that in itself has taken a lot of time for them, and that will be a couple months of work, I think. So, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Question. In your report, you mentioned there were an abnormally large number of deer carcasses in the trash racks.
Yeah.
Do
no,
we
not a
report?
large number of them, but we had one. And
oh, okay. I was
and,
wondering if we report those to DEC, if there's any count that they keep.
Not that I'm aware of.
No. Okay.
But I actually had the fortune of assisting our field superintendent the other day of removing a large turtle from the trash racks in Old Forge.
There's been a lot of those around.
It's really awful.
Turtles everywhere.
Yeah. So.
Is there work to be scheduled this spring or summer on any of the dams in your area?
There is work. We are doing an RFP.
The RFQ is
RFQ.
for engineering assessment.
At Old Forge and Six Lake.
Is there any concrete? Wasn't there concrete work scheduled or no?
That's
That's
yeah.
The outcome of the assessment
Okay.
might be, or will likely be, a recommendation for Old Forge, some concrete repairs and improvements.
Did we do anything with Hawkinsville? Other than ignore it?
Oh, no, we actually just had the.
We just had a kickoff meeting Friday morning with the engineer.
I went by here yesterday and had sheriff logs hanging over the
I don't know.
Malone
dam
McBroom.
itself.
Yeah, our engineering consultant, Malone McBroom, visited and spent the day, an engineer spent the day gathering data and discussing with us for a few hours in the beginning of the day our expectations with regard to evaluating remediation or potential removal of that structure, and developing basically a preliminary or feasibility level costs of the two alternatives. And subset of the remediation alternative includes identifying several potential methods for bringing the facility into compliance with state DEC dam safety regulations, and then making a recommendation from that group to the district board.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions? All right. Audit committee.
Mr. Chairman, we have no old business, and under new business, we have to entertain a resolution to amend the audit services agreement and to exercise an option. And I call on Mr. Farrar.
Thank you, Mr. Finkel. On page 150, beginning on 150 through 160, my memo. This again is pursuant to public authority law, in this case 2802, that the district must submit an annual independent audit performed by a certified public accounting firm in accordance with generally accepted government auditing standards, in a management letter. And over the last 3 years, this will be the 4th year, we have utilized the Bonadeo Group. The auditing principal has been Randy Shepard. This resolution and amendment to the contract would retain, once again, Randy Shepard as the principal. Public authority law allows the principal to be engaged 5 years, so we're still within that window. And even though the original procurement, which was a mini bid through the Office of General Services, has expired, this is still a discretionary purchase under $50,000. I did not see any value add to the district to go out and resolicit services to other firms. Number one, the new firm always has a learning curve. Independent audits are very closely monitored. The standards are black and white. At the end of the day, for me personally, and in the 30 years I've been in finance, once that audit is signed, I really don't care who signs it. And the fact that I know Randy Shepard, I know his firm, and the quality of their product and service has been excellent, I saw no reason to go through a fairly involved solicitation. So I offer, and on page 151 is Randy's engagement letter, which covers the areas that he will be involved in. And on page 158 is the resolution, and 159 is a copy of amendment number 3, which the bottom line is this would provide for the Bonadeo Group, Randy Shepard as principal, to perform an audit of the upcoming close of the second year of the 3-year cycle, which will be this June 30th, 2011, and to do that at a not-to-exceed amount of $17,000, and that is up, I think that is a 4-point-something% increase over last year, which I believe was $16,005, if memory serves me.
Yes.
Correct, 16.5. So I offer this to the audit committee for their review and approval. And if you have any other questions.
There's none. I'd like to move. Oh, yes, okay. Yes, I'd like to open up to the full board and make that recommendation.
Got a recommendation from the audit committee to accept the resolution for the audit. Have a motion?
Also moved.
No, second.
Okay, I have a motion and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All righty, that concludes the committees. Anything else? Do we have any old board business? Anybody wants to bring up? Any new board business that anybody would like to bring up? You're making this too easy. All right, any questions, comments?
One last resolution
Oh, we have a resolution?
will be next.
Oh, next board meeting, that's
board
not
meeting
good.
location.
Yeah. All right, I'm looking for a resolution for the next board meeting, which would be Tuesday, July 12th at the Mayfield Municipal Complex,
Correct.
Mayfield, New York, 10 a.m. Do I have a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Second? Bill? Motion and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. We'll meet at Mayfield. All right. Just move into executive session. And I don't anticipate any business on it afterwards.
We will just come back to adjourn.
Just come back to adjourn.